Hello. Hello, everyone. Apologies for the technical problems. I am Sandeep, and I work as a research fellow here at the East West Center. Uh, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to the East West Center Research Program Speaker Series today. The speaker series invites speakers from across the Asia Pacific to talk about the social, political, economic, and ecological processes that shape the region. Um, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Samantha Kies-Ryan. Dr. Ryan is the director of Earth Water People, a company that works with communities to supply them with clean water now and into the future. She is a communications, community engagement, and social impact specialist with years of experience working in the Pacific Island region. She is an experienced communications and media professional with 15 years of working in Australia and Pacific in communication for development and social change. Without further ado, I would like to hand over the floor to Samantha to introduce the panel and to take it forward. Samantha, over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sandeep. As Sandeep said, I am the Research, Innovation and Collaboration Exchange Fellow at the East West Center. So as part of that, I have been tasked with organising this symposium for us to spread ideas and ways of working forward in this field towards innovation. So thank you all for coming, and thanks to our speakers. Accessing clean water in the Pacific is a large problem. As I outlined in my East West Center Speaker Series talk last month, I'm also working on an article for East West Center's Asia Pacific issues that will be coming out soon. We as a region are being left behind in achieving SDG 6, and we will need holistic, innovative and collaborative solutions to working with communities in this space if we are to achieve our goal of giving access to clean water for all. So I've invited the following speakers who are all leaders in their field to talk about what's happening and what we might do innovatively and differently, and how we can create a community of practice to work together on these issues. Pauline Comalong and Colin Benjamin are not available today, but we have a fantastic lineup of speakers for you today. Firstly, we have Mary Alalo. Mary is passionate about climate change adaptation, disaster risk reduction, and strengthening water security as a key determinant of resilience. She grew up facing the hardship of insecure water as she comes from two of the most vulnerable islands in the Solomon Islands, Ongtong Java atolls and Tikopia Islands, prone to climate weather extremes and sea level rise. The hardships of too little water, water scarcity, and too much water, flooding, inspired her to work in the climate change, disaster, and water security space. Mary combines her first-hand experience of water insecurities and her experience of battling extreme climatic events, such as tropical severe cyclones, with her technical knowledge and experience as a practitioner to elevate the water security needs of vulnerable communities on different platforms. Mary has 24 years of work experience in climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction, water security, community-driven development, capacity building, education policy, advocacy, program management, and microfinance management. Her work experience includes working with development partners such as AusAid, the World Bank, the Australian Development Bank, the Solomon Islands Government Ministry of Environment, Climate Change, Disaster Management and Meteorology, and the Solomon Islands Ministry of Education and Human Resource Development, including international non-government organisations such as Oxfam, Australia, Australian Volunteers International, Asia South Pacific Bureau for Basic and Adult Education Australia, and with civil society organisations and comprising grassroots women organisations such as the Solomon Islands, Rokotana Keni Women Association, and People with Disabilities Solomon Islands. Mary currently works as the Water Security Engagement Lead with the Pacific Community, Geoscience, Energy and Maritime Division, Disaster and Community Resilience Program Water Security Team. Mayela, the next speaker, we're very pleased to have you, Mary, and your wealth of experience with us. Mayela is the next speaker. Mayela Reyes Puente is WASH coordinator at NGO Live and Learn based in Melbourne, Australia. She is a community development practitioner who has worked extensively across the Asia Pacific and Mexico, from coordinating climate resilience and public health campaigns to lecturing and developing applied research. Her work focuses on knowledge sharing and implementing sustainable solutions. She is an advocate for doing development differently through communal learning and decolonizing our practices. Welcome, Mayela. And our last speaker is Erin Derrington. Erin Derrington is the Global Energy and Water Communities of Practice Coordinator, Local 2030 Islands Network, who is supporting member-identified resilience building priorities in islands to achieve holistic adaptation of the built and natural environments in the face of climate change. Leveraging her background in environmental law and policy, as well as water resources and wetland science, Ms. Derrington has been supporting creation and implementation of coastal resources, management plans, policies, laws, and implementation efforts in the Pacific and in coastal and climate adaptation for nearly 2 decades. This work builds on past experience ranging from developing climate adaptation content for the Land Trust Committee, facilitating shoreline access planning on Guam, teaching environmental management courses and supporting resiliency planning efforts in Maui County. She is committed to furthering the global sustainable development goals, focusing on building communities of practice to create and implement right-sized interventions. What a great panel of speakers from a broad range of different regions from Hawaii across the Pacific. I'm really looking forward to this discussion of what we can do from the regional to the local level. Without further ado, I will cue the slides and invite Mary to start.
Thank you, Samantha, and hello, everyone. And it's a pleasure to join this seminar on water security. As Samantha said, my name is Mary Alalo, and I work as the Water Security Engagement Lead with the Pacific community. So the work I do really focuses on strengthening water security as a key determinant of resilience. And if we can go to the second slide, please. So I would like to put forward this question to all of us. What does water really mean to you? For those in low-lying islands that are really facing water scarcity, especially our low-lying islands and atolls, water means everything. And so water conservation becomes very important in atoll countries and in low-lying islands in some of the volcanic islands of the Pacific. And I would also like to put forward this question: how many of us really think about the critical importance of water as the connector to achieving other sustainable development goals? For example, do we really think about water security as the connector to other sectors like agriculture, water for food security, water for climate and resilience development? Do we really think about those questions in our everyday today interactions, or do we just take water for granted? So those are some of the questions I would really like to put forward, because with the work we do around strengthening water security as a critical determinant of resilience, we found that water security is not visible in a lot of regional and national frameworks. It is barely visible. And that's why when we talk about strengthening engagement on water security as a key determinant of resilience, it becomes very important, especially with the growing extreme events we face with climate change. So I would really like to encourage us to please think about those questions as we go along this seminar. Next slide, please. So I always like to share the rhyme of the unsaint mariner who is surrounded by lots of water in the ocean, and then he realizes that despite being surrounded by water everywhere, not a drop of it is drinkable. And that is the biggest threat small island states are facing with the extremes of climate change. And the 6th IPCC report states that the water security of small island states is really a threat. And we really need to prioritize water security. Next slide, please. So if I can just take us to look at how is the Pacific performing as a region in terms of sustainable development goal 6 in terms of access to basic drinking water, sanitation and hygiene services. As a region, the Pacific Island countries are really the lowest in terms of basic drinking water access. So if you look at the graph there, you can see where the region as a whole is performing. We are really the lowest globally. Next slide, please. And if we look at access to basic sanitation facilities as a region, the Pacific has persistent low levels of access to basic sanitation facilities. So you can see we are even lower than Sub-Saharan Africa. Oceania is very, very low, and the stats from the Joint Monitoring Program report of 2023 shows that access to basic sanitation is declining across the Pacific. Although there's progress, but that progress is not keeping pace with increasing population growth and the growing impacts of climate change risk and disasters. Next slide, please. And if we look at urbanization in terms of which regions is the least urbanized region, again, Oceania is the most. I think all of us know that we have a lot of our people living in rural areas. So again, the Pacific or Oceania is the least urbanized sub-region in the world. Sorry, I have a lot of people talking there. Okay, so because the Pacific has a large part of its population living in rural areas, there is a big disparity in terms of access to clean water and sanitation and hygiene when we look at the numbers between urban access and rural areas access. So there's that great disparity. So if we look at that, the urban population has the high access in terms of basic compared to rural areas which have very low access. And we are only talking about basic access here, not even safe access. Next slide, please. So if we look across the region in terms of SDG 6 as a region, we are really not on track to achieve universal access to basic drinking water, sanitation or hygiene services. And yeah, so there is progress, like I mentioned before, but it is not keeping pace with the increasing population growth and other development issues. And the biggest threat we continue to face is a recurring disaster. So we can have good progress, but when a disaster like a cyclone hits, it damages or destroys the water infrastructures, and then we have to rebuild again. So that's the constant, or I would say regular situation that the Pacific faces. Next slide. And in terms of climate and disaster risk, the 2021 World Risk Index shows that the Pacific is amongst the world's most exposed nations to the risk of natural hazards. And you can see that the Pacific was really in the top 20 of those countries that were at risk to climate and disaster risk. However, I think in 2022, they changed the criteria for that report, and now that the Pacific is no longer in the top 20. So what does that really mean for the Pacific as a region, given that we are really at the forefront of climate change risk and disasters? Next question, sorry, next slide. So I would like to just say a little bit of some of the tropical cyclones the Pacific has experienced. So I think, as we all know, the Pacific has really experienced a lot of tropical category 5 cyclones. And this is one example of a tropical 5 cyclone that hit Vanuatu. And when there's a tropical 5 cyclones, a lot of infrastructures are damaged or destroyed, and WAS infrastructures are one of the most services that's really disrupted. And even if we make progress, but if we are not really integrating climate adaptation and disaster risk reduction into the work that we do, then when a cyclone hits, everything is destroyed. And so building back better becomes very critical to the work that we do around water security. Next slide. And apart from climate disasters, we also face a lot of geohazards. So for example, volcanic eruption. So I think we all heard about the Tonga volcanic eruptions, and a lot of impact was felt by the nation in terms of access to water. So it's not only climate change risk we are experiencing, but we also experience a lot of geohazards like volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and all those. So those also impact on our access to water security. Next slide, please. Okay, so we will just spend a little time looking at sea level rise. So I would like to say a little bit about a 3D model that the Pacific community developed using LiDAR data that was collected by the USGS on Majuro. So that map is of Laura area, which is in Majuro, which has a population of 2,500 and about 30,000 in Majuro. And this is the widest part of the atoll with about 1,200 meters, and it has very critical infrastructures like farms, food security schools, community halls, and it has the largest, biggest water lands on the island. And sorry, next slide. So that photo shows the freshwater lands on Laura Island. And that lens shows where the freshwater lens is really thick on Laura Island. And there are monitoring bores that were installed to really monitor the salinity level on that freshwater lens. So you can see the lens or contours. It shows the freshwater lens between 2.5 meters, 5.5 meters, 7.5 to 15 meters. And the purpose of the tree model really shows how saltwater intrusion can occur. So, can you show that slide? So if we are looking at a return period of 100 years during normal conditions without sea level rise, so we are just looking about high tides, king tides, and storm surges. That is the level of risk from flooding that will happen on the island. So the buildings you see which are in red, that's where the salt water or flooding would happen in terms of 100-year return period during normal conditions without sea level rise. Next slide, please. Okay, if we look at the return period of 10 years with the sea level rise of 25 centimeters, we can see the impact is similar to 100-year return period, like in normal conditions. Next slide. Okay, so if we look at the return period of 50 years with a sea level rise of 20 centimeters, we can see that the sea level rise has encroached on a lot of infrastructures, has been flooded, for example, hospitals, schools, and at 2.5 meters, it's creeping into the freshwater lands. Next slide, please. Okay, if we look at the return period of 100 years, 25 centimeters sea level rise, we can see that the sea has really grown into the sea level, freshwater length of about 5 meters, even 7.5 meters. Next slide. And if we look at a 100 period return period of 50 centimeter sea level rise, we can see that a lot of the infrastructures and the freshwater lands has been infiltrated, and so there's a lot of salinity. And this does not mean that the island will disappear. It means that a lot of water is trapped inland, and it will take some time for the water to go down. So the impact on freshwater lands on the island is very severe, and people will face a lot of water scarcity and issues, and including animals. Next slide, please. So we can see that the Pacific is really at a critical stage where we really need to put water security as a key pillar in our frameworks. And these are some of the examples where our nations have really experienced the impacts of water. So whilst water is life, but water is also a hazard. So in this presentation, I'm really focusing on water is life. We need water for food security, health outcomes, gender outcomes, but we also need to integrate climate and disaster resilience, because water is also a hazard. As the director for Solomon Islands Meteorology said, always like to say is that water is deadly and water can kill. So too much water, flooding. We can see Fiji went through a state of emergency due to heavy rainfall, and drought hits some of our Pacific Island countries as well. So the need to really integrate climate change and disaster risk into the work we do around water security is very critical. Next slide, please. So if we are to look at the Pacific Island in terms of countries and territories with no surface water resources, we see 6 of our atoll countries do not have access to surface water. So they are dependent on rainwater harvesting and groundwater. Next slide. And if we look at other countries with low-lying islands, then the number of communities with no surface water increases. So the Pacific really is home to significant population on islands with no surface water resources, and rainwater harvesting becomes critical, protecting our limited groundwater on low-lying islands and atolls become very, very critical as we focus on water security. Next slide. So what have we done to really strengthen water security as a critical element of resilience? So we've focused on supporting our members with what I like to think as the hardware, which are the water sources, the water infrastructures, and also the software. So looking at the institutional capacities, behaviors, practices. So really the focus is on strengthening engagement on water security. And some of the work we focus on is looking at what levels do we engage our at the different levels, vertical, horizontal engagement. Are we really engaging meaningfully? Is water security a key priority area, or is it visible enough or not really visible? And if we look at sectoral engagement, how are the sectors really engaged? Is there a dedicated budget for water security across the sectors, or is it only when there is no water, when there is a drought, or when there is a flood, and we just react? So those are the kind of things we look at, and we focus on strengthening those areas to make sure that we are very proactive. We don't just react when there is a disaster. Next slide, please. And so the work we do around strengthening water security engagement, we anchor that work within established specific regional mechanisms like the Pacific Resilience Partnership Framework for Resilient Development in the Pacific, FRDP, which has 3 goals. Strengthen integrated adaptation and disaster risk reduction and climate change, and goal 2, which is low carbon development, and goal 3, which is strengthen disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. So we really anchor the work around water security on the framework for resilient development in the Pacific. Next slide, please. And so the PRP provides the mechanism for water security engagement, and we have established a water security engagement partnership technical working group, which drives the work on water security engagement. Next slide. And the other regional framework that guides the work that we do across the Pacific is the 2050 strategy, and water security is included under the climate change pillar. Next slide. And so we have used the Pacific Resilience Standard 4 pillars to really strengthen water security engagement. And the 4 pillars are integrate, include, inform, and sustain. Next slide. And there's work that we are really working on, which is a draft engagement strategy to strengthen water security engagement. And it's 6 years from 2024 to 2030. And we are about to share it with the Water Security Technical Working Group to review. And this will guide how we strengthen water security engagement. Next slide. And so with the water security engagement strategy, it has 4 outcome pillars. One is integrate, so looking at how do we integrate water security issues and solutions across relevant sectors, and looking at inclusion. So how do we include Pacific voices for water security dialogue for development and resilience, and inform, so looking at actionable information, access to data, to research on water security. And pillar 4 is sustaining, so really looking at how do we enable, sustain, and effective engagement on water security to support Pacific resilience. Next slide. Yeah, so that's all. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about water security engagement.
Thank you so much, Mary. That was a really, really conclusive overview of what's happening in the region, you know, what the broader issue is and what's being spearheaded on a regional level. Thank you so much. Just keep your questions to the end. We have a Q&A channel if you want to put your questions there, and we'll come back to them at the end for the discussion. Now we will go to Mayela, who is talking about what Live and Learn is doing at the more like the local to regional level in supporting climate islands in their Climate Resilient Islands initiative. Mayela, would you like to start?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm going to have an overview about the climate resilience programs from Live and Learn. Just for an introduction, Live and Learn is an NGO, and we are part of a 11 countries network across Asia and the Pacific. And our main working areas are food security, climate change, WASH, and environmental protection. Next slide, please. And I'm going to speak, the program, the umbrella program is the Climate Resilience Islands. We work in Fiji, Tonga, Vanuatu, Tuvalu, Solomons, and PNG. And we work in ecosystem restoration, livelihoods and food security, disaster risk, and WASH. And I'm going to focus on CRY WASH. But CRY takes a bottom-up approach and incorporates MBS and indigenous knowledge to strengthen community resilience to the impacts of climate change. And we achieve this through creating community profiles and work with the communities to do for them to create their own pathways and implementing activities that will work with what they have, their context and their ecosystems. And yeah, and how do this CRY WASH is implemented in PNG, Tuvalu, Tonga, and Vanuatu, and this is just because this is where we have water projects. So unfortunately, not all the CRY countries are included, but most of them are, which is exciting. And so how does this CRY WASH looks like? Well, that will depend on the community and their specific needs, but generally speaking, communities will be working towards water resilience and water resource management. So, yeah. And next slide, please. This is just, some nice pictures of last year. We did that profile plan launching in Tonga around 3 islands, Hapai and Vavau. And it was really exciting to see the community come together and see the final product of what their profile plan is. We work in these famous profile plans, and the work afterwards, it's working on the 3 concepts, which is absorb, adapt, and transform. So every idea, every work that the community is doing, go through those, working through these 3 concepts, which makes it really interesting to see what are their strengths, what are the opportunities in the parts of their community and their ecosystem. Next slide, please. And the next slide is just quick snapshot of workshops on Hapai. After the community profile plans, we implemented 2 to 3 day workshops, which will lead to do the pathways, which eventually will go into the implemented activities. So it's kind of a long process, but it is important that this is community-led, that there's that the community is consulted on what is that they actually need and want, but also adapted into a nature-based solution lens. And we use a capacity assessment and strategies framework to start dividing, working on that information. You can see the pictures, and it's I really like the one of the map because it's called the best future. So ideally, in an ideal world, how does the best version of your community looks? And it's really nice to see how they pour, water in the river. The river is safe and it's not flooding our houses. We can work in our gardens and not worry about a drought because we have access to rainwater. And so it's really nice to see how things can be in the context, if we have all the elements to make it work. Next slide, please. So I'm gonna use these trigger questions to kind of reflect into what the CRY program has been doing. So to work holistically in water security in the Pacific, we found that it's essential to adopt a whole system perspective, recognizing that water resources are intrinsically connected to both people and land, which that just like the elements cannot be separated. So we consider that resilience it's a web. So understanding that community, sociocultural, and environmental interconnections, we're all connected, and this is a wonderful example of a community, how all things, living, non-living, everything is connected. There's other pictures that they even show, church, NGOs, the things that are important at that work to make the community where they are. And all these factors have an impact in climate change, and how the community work through the resilience to respond to these challenges. And we use an ecosystem-based approach and adaptive management when in working with CRY, because this way we can ensure that the water security efforts are both sustainable and contextualized. So we don't try to bring any ideas from other islands or other communities that might not be important in their context. So it's really important for us for them to talk to us so we can understand and work together. And when addressing the unique challenges of the Pacific region, it's important to see to get that how it works within them. And we also try to foster collaboration across sectors through our work and through our relationships. So we are not isolated groups. We are not isolated people. We have to work together. So we try to foster that collaboration when we are working in CRY. And next slide, please. And with this in mind, and following with these reflections, we want to talk about how CRY aims to link what's happening locally, what is happening regionally, because it's, as I mentioned, it's not about what happens in one community, but also about learning, sharing, and connected to other countries that are going through the same processes, lessons learned, how things went in this phase, and how things could be better, if we learn from that. So as I mentioned in the first slide, we are a network, which makes this a little bit easier, that we can connect with different teams and talk through it. For me, it was really important that the countries that were more advanced will have chats with for example, Solomon Islands, that was just starting the program, to have a chat with PNG that they were halfway. So what do I want to know better? What do I want? What would I have done differently? So that's something that really worked for us. And we are proactive about fostering partnerships that support local practices, not only focusing in the local expertise, but also trying to work and make indigenous knowledge a part of our program cycle. And we are working through strengthening local and regional challenge through knowledge sharing. So as you can see, knowledge sharing, it's trickle-down knowledge is really important for us. Working to having real-time, no string attached collaboration for a more cohesive regional cooperation. Even if it's outside our focus areas, we can all feed each other and try to navigate and recommend where we can, work with how the community can work in areas that maybe we cannot help. For example, we don't really necessarily do infrastructure, but profile plan is a great way of to advocate for your community. What NGOs can you talk to? What other organizations can you have a conversation about your needs? So that is very important. And so yeah, for example, also in the CRY world, in the CRY universe, we are developing a partnership training program with partner organizations across the Pacific. So that will be Nauru, Micronesia, Samoa, to build a learning community. So the knowledge won't stay in us. The knowledge it's the facilitation work will not only stay in with Live and Learn, it will go outside of Live and Learn. So that is very important. And the not string attached, it means that if you are interested in some of the ideas or some of the guides or educational tools, you can always go and check the website and you can get them. And it's not, you don't need to join us, you don't need to work for us, you don't need to pay us, it's there. So it's really important for us. So from profile plans, that are the most basic one, to actually facilitate the whole workshop of how to do your action plans. So that's one of the things we're trying to do. Next slide, please. And from the profile plans, I can use as I mentioned, as advocacy and visibility tools to create collaborative platforms, as I'm saying, with the partnership program and the CRY toolkit that you can access, and communities can use to plan actions for community resilience. We really seek opportunities to share what we're doing and what it works, and how for the community to lead their own pathways. So we're also trying to work more into the conference, symposiums. So hence why we were here. So for research to meet practical problems, it's always nice to hear all the research and all the case students that other institutions and organizations have been doing. And since we are very hands-on and very field work, it's an interesting process to match both of them and see how you can work together and and make these connections happen. So these different tools and opportunities that are part of CRY, they also work to develop the links towards these four actors, which are practitioner communities, researchers, and funders. And because when we put the communities front and center, along with developing actionable plans, sustainable actionable plans, we're trying to create deeper connections and more effective collaborations, all the stakeholders. And with this, hopefully, maybe we can create accessible channels for funding and resource mobilization, which is something we're trying to do. And I can already see it in Tonga. For me, the example of infrastructure was, one of the communities wanted to work toward the bridge because that was their exit if in case of a natural disaster. We couldn't do infrastructure. Unfortunately, we would love to, but that is not nature-based solution. So how do you do it? Well, MFAT was our funding, right? Well, that's where we got our funding. And one of the visits was a coincidence, and MFAT was there. So the CRY team, the Lebanon CRY team, was like, hey, you know what? You are here because you are doing this project in infrastructure. We are here because we're doing CRY. How about we introduce each other? And it was really nice that at least there's a conversation, and at least there's no, oh, I have a nice plan and I have nice ideas, but also there's other things that we would like to achieve as a community. So yeah, collaboration and working together and not, hoarding that information and that knowledge is very important for us. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayela. That was really interesting. I really enjoyed that. And it was good to see kind of what's happening at the grassroots community level kind of and regional as well. And one of the questions that I had banked about was around collaboration between sectors and because water is so multifaceted. Once you're talking to communities, you're talking about health, you're talking about infrastructure, you're talking about all these different things, which we're often a bit hobbled by. So I really enjoyed that example and practice about MFAT and the infrastructure and ways that we can build across and work together. Thank you. If anybody else has questions for Mayela, please put them in the comments or the Q&A and I'll come back to them. But we will for now go to the next speaker, who is Erin. Erin, would you like to take it away?
Thank you, Dr. Sam, and greetings all. I hope you can hear me all right. My name is Erin Derrington, and I am the Global Energy and Water Communities of Practice Coordinator with the Local 2030 Islands Network. And I'm currently living on Maui, but for nearly the last decade, I facilitated sustainable planning and implementation initiatives underway in Saipan in the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands as their lead planner and coastal resource management specialist. So I'm very excited to share with you today about how the Local 2030 Islands Network, a nonprofit United Nations 2030 hub, is supporting islands working together for a more sustainable world with a focus on innovation, collaboration, and holistic water management systems in alignment with the whole systems approach that Mary and Mayela have just outlined in their presentations today as well. So on the next slide, I'll start my introduction to the network and provide you a brief outline. So more specifically today, I'll be sharing a very high-level overview of the network, our approach, key elements of our portfolios relative to our communities of practice, and localized dashboards, which together work to support island-led adaptation planning and implementation efforts with a focus on water security in alignment with today's panel. Building on the theme of creating bridges between practitioners and policymakers and subject matter experts to achieve effective collaboration and reflecting on the importance of information sharing that Mayela was just highlighting, I will also be sharing opportunities to further align these efforts with the tools we're offering to support your work and continue these critical conversations regarding the pressing need to ensure a more resilient, secure water future for all. And then I'll be providing a very brief example of some bright spots of of sustainable growth policy, project planning, and implementation tracking in the context of what this is looking like in the Hawaii Green Growth Initiative and their Aloha Plus Challenge, reflecting on their natural resources management goal. So if our kind host could perhaps post some links here, we'll be sharing these also as a follow-up. But I will be going into basically how the HGG Hawaii Green Growth Aloha Plus Challenge, an online geospatial dashboard, is providing an innovative approach to visualizing and tracking progress being made towards the Sustainable Development Goals, and give you some specific examples in that regard. Localization of the Sustainable Development Goals that you see visualized here, as well as regeneration and resilience building, are thematic areas that the Local 2030 Islands Network has been operationalizing to further island-led innovation towards the sort of right-size objectives of their respective islands. So we've already heard a little bit about SDG 6, but as Mary also mentioned, the furtherance of sustainable, clean, sanitary water access is also connected to the rest of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which were adopted by all United Nations members in 2015, being revised and expanded from the Millennial Development Goals that preceded them. The focus of these goals really is to support a holistic development policy that ends poverty and other deprivations, that go hand in hand with strategies that are necessary to improve health and education, reduce inequalities, spur economic growth, all while tackling the urgent issue of climate change and working to preserve our oceans, forests, and watersheds. But sustainable development theory has predated the United Nations global thought leadership in this space. Island communities have and continue to be leaders in sustainability action, and it is due to this fact, in part, as well as its leadership in launching the Aloha Plus Challenge over a decade ago, that Hawaii Green Growth was selected to host the Local 2030 Islands Network as a hub, helping to implement the Sustainable Development Goal initiatives with a focus on islands, highlighting island innovation in this space. So in coordination with the Global Islands Partnership, Hawaii Green Growth UN Local 2030 Hub and the Local 2030 Islands Network are one of 8 Local 2030 hubs that are leading on efforts to localize and share knowledge about localizing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, working to implement these priorities at a local level. So we are working to bring together diverse sets of island economies, nation states, communities at large from all regions of the world to promote island solutions and leadership based on shared experiences and island culture, serving as a platform to engage each other as peers, to raise ambition on the goals in general and further specific priorities through shared experiences, spreading knowledge, promoting solidarity, and identifying and implementing leading practices for sustainability solutions. So on the next slide, you'll see our vision statement. It is our vision to achieve a sustainable island Earth inspired by island leadership and values. And so this UN 2030 Hub is highlighting islands as laboratories for innovation. And my portfolio in particular is focusing on the cutting nexus of energy, water, food, urban issues, as well as integrated ridge to reef projects that are helping to catalyze and scale implementation actions. Islands are leading and are uniquely positioned to share these solutions, and our work is to also connect people and help scale globally the solutions that work to help accelerate meaningful progress towards shared development challenges. On the next slide, you'll see our mission, which is to catalyze local partnership and action to achieve the SDGs. Recent reports from the United Nations recognize that top-down global initiatives are not enough to make progress towards and achieve the goals. Instead, localization of the goals, implementation of priorities, and tracking progress is critical. It is through bottom-up, locally led interventions that we as a global society can make meaningful and lasting progress towards the SDGs. Sharing lessons learned and bright spots further amplifies opportunities to maximize effective implementation efforts. So we do this in collaboration with members and partners who you will see visualized on the next slide. We currently have over 27 island economies that are official members and more in queue, as well as numerous partners with whom we work to collaborate with at state and sub-state, as well as regional and global levels. Our network of members and partners is growing and is united by the unique challenges and perspectives and leadership of island communities that is being demonstrated in this space. Our members and partners endorse our guiding principles of impact, which you will see on the next slide. And it is through this approach of engaging at the highest political levels, as well as creating a networking space for practitioners at all stages of their careers and subject matter experts, that we are building on trust-based relationships to activate public-private partnerships, to identify development priorities, implement concrete actions, and track progress towards identified goals. This model grows on other models that have been successful, particularly in the Pacific region, such as the Micronesia Conservation Trust, emphasizing the importance of public-private partnerships as an effective and unique point of consensus that creates a central hub to articulate and measure progress towards goals. Our network portfolio, summarized on the next slide, basically focuses on maintaining partnerships both at the highest leadership level and also facilitating engagement through that bottom-up approach, connecting through communities of practice and activating dashboards to measure progress and analyze data to support data-driven policymaking and implementation efforts. As reflected in the Aloha Plus Challenge that I'll share a bit more detail with shortly, as well as Guam's Green Growth Initiative and other recently launched green growth planning efforts in Palau, in the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands and other islands, a leading practice in island innovation for strategic sustainable development planning is this localization piece of the SDGs to reflect and align with community priorities. So again, public-private partnerships, measurement, and concrete action support this localization and implementation of local goals and have been not only our guiding principles, but hallmarks of success of Hawaii's Green Growth Initiative, the Aloha Plus Challenge, which is further tracked through the Aloha Plus dashboard, which you have a link to in the chat. Our network's portfolio focuses on building top-down and bottom-up engagement and measuring data-driven policy progress through these localized dashboards, which are supported by networks of practitioners and subject matter experts. So on the next slide, I'll share a bit more about the communities of practice, which in theory are just interactive, member-driven networks of people who come together to learn and support individual and group goals. We collaborate with diverse experts to provide technical assistance on island-led priorities. And our communities of practice are where we connect policy and practice with those concrete actions and support peer-to-peer knowledge sharing with the goal to scale right-sized solutions. So currently, as informed by our member priorities, we have 4 communities of practice: the regenerative tourism, data for climate resilience, resilient and clean energy systems, and resilient water systems that all are working on furthering elements of the Sustainable Development Goals. We have recently launched an online platform to further enable networking across regions and time zones, and we are looking forward to growing that engagement. So you can scan these QR codes. We'll also be sharing these links in the follow-up materials, but you're all invited to join in these conversations, which we hope to continue on that virtual island platform space as well. On the next slide, relevant to the topic today, I wanted to go just a bit of a deeper dive into the water community of practice. And again, we'll be sharing these links, but I hope you'll consider signing up and sharing. It's free to join, and we really hope to continue these important conversations regarding how we can further meaningful progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals in general and Goal 6 specifically. On the next slide, you'll see an example of what goal localization and activation of these partnerships has looked like in Hawaii, where 6 thematic action areas were defined, measured, and visualized to track progress and support adaptive management interventions. So this is an example of one approach to convening and building consensus across cross-cutting green growth priorities. And here you see the 6 thematic areas, and this is really an outgrowth of legacies of community initiatives, including Hawaii 2000, Malama Hawaii, Hawaii 2050, to support collective action. As we are talking about water security today, we'll be taking a quick deeper dive into the Natural Resources Management Sustainability Goal, which is to reverse the trend of natural resource loss, Mauka to Makai, or mountain to sea, by increasing freshwater security, watershed protection, community-based marine management, invasive species control, and restoration of native species, a fairly comprehensive goal. On the next slide, you will see a drill down to identified metrics. And you may notice that the objectives and metrics here are a bit modified compared to the Sustainable Development Goals. In fact, these goals and objectives predated the Agenda 2030 SDGs, but you can see areas of alignment reflected at the bottom of your screens as well. I won't read each target, but as relative to watershed management, for example, the goal is established that by 2030, 30% of watershed forests would be protected. This goal is measured by tracking the acreage of native priority watersheds under high levels of protection, and 20% of the land area in the Hawaiian Islands has been identified as priority watersheds, which is where that 843,000 acres number comes from. You can see that some objectives are classified as near target, some are still being measured, and some are classified as needing improvement. So I would suggest this is an innovative policy tool that can also help support adaptive management interventions. On the next slide, you will be able to take a bit of a deeper drill down into the collected data, and you can see how this aligns with some, but not necessarily all, of SDG 6 targets. Implementation efforts are further spotlighted and linked on the tools, so people can see what's happening in their neighborhoods and their backyards, and notably, each of the Hawaiian Island counties have adopted these initiatives as well, and so some of that work is being spotlighted here also. On the next slide, you'll see an example of one implementation initiative, and this is the Hawaii Green Growth-led Follow the Drop project, which is an emerging bright spot of implementation action. And as the video loads, it shows that flooding, brown water events, water quality impacts have been a major challenge in terms of water systems management in Hawaii. And flood risk in particular is a critical concern for safety and resilience in the communities of the Alawai watershed, which impacts Honolulu's most densely populated drainage area and its surrounding infrastructure, economy, natural habitats, and water quality. As a watershed that's highly vulnerable to climate impacts, including increasingly large and frequent storm events and sea level rise, effective flood risk management is essential to protect residents, businesses, the natural environment, and the watershed from the devastating effects of flooding. Without adequate mitigation measures and preparedness, the region faces increased risks of property damage, economic loss, potential displacement, and this exacerbates existing vulnerabilities and inequities. So the challenges of flood risk and water quality impacts in the Alawai watershed, although they are multifaceted, involving both natural and human-induced factors, can be addressed at a local level. And this project, the Follow the Drop initiative, aims to help to recharge our aquifers and mitigate flooding and brownwater runoff events by identifying appropriate green stormwater infrastructure, which includes rain gardens, bioswales, rain barrels, and other effective ways of achieving stormwater management on site, especially where soil conditions promote groundwater recharge. So this project, I would suggest, is innovative in that Hawaii Green Growth conducted extensive mapping assessing flood risk and socio-ecological indicators, and is using a locally developed app called Follow the Drop to conduct free rainwater assessments at properties across the watershed in order to identify and recommend appropriate green stormwater infrastructure for homeowners and property managers. So basically the app, in partnership with 3R Water, produces a report that then can help the homeowners identify potentially appropriate interventions, and then funding to support the implementation of those green stormwater interventions is being provided through a grant from National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. So while this is all in progress, as that progress moves forward, updates will be shared through the Aloha Plus dashboard, and corresponding data and relevant bright spots will be included in Hawaii's voluntary local review and also shared throughout our network. Just to give another quick overview of what green growth is looking like in some of our other jurisdictions. On the next slide, you'll see a snapshot of Guam Green Growth's initiative. And here we have 5 categories of action supported by 5 working groups to further progress on their identified goals. I won't read in all of them for you, but yes, water quality and watershed management as measured by land conservation emerged as targets in this process as well. So this is all to highlight that we as Local 2030 Island Network are supporting processes of goal setting and localization, data tracking and sharing, and we are coming out with a playbook that will highlight this process as it's been developed in Hawaii, Guam, Palau, and other island jurisdictions. While the approaches can vary, we are observing, and to build on again the theme that we were discussing earlier, the importance of information sharing, leveraging public-private partnerships, connecting with community goals in order to make meaningful progress towards growth priorities. And so in conclusion, working together, we are able to leverage limited resources, implement policy and resource management interventions that work to further progress towards priority growth outcomes. So on the next slide, I'll just conclude with a heartfelt thank you to Dr. Sam, to my co-panelists, attendees, and to the East-West Center for hosting this important discussion, highlighting the need for, as well as examples of innovation in the water security space. And I hope you will all join the water community of practice so we can continue these conversations, highlight your bright spots, and be part of the solutions to promoting holistic watershed management for a more secure and sustainable water future for us all. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Erin. That was I really enjoyed that presentation, looking at what's happening in the region, and it was interesting to hear what's happening locally in Hawaii as well, and that example of practice, and then reaching out to the broader region. We'll go to the Q&A now. Well, firstly, I'll just kind of summarize what I heard. Like, it was really great, everybody's presentation. Everybody's really talking about the need for kind of larger scale, kind of holistic work in this space, to be reactive, to be proactive with communities and support them, and not just reactive when a natural disaster happens. To work across kind of sectors, as Mayela was saying, in different ways, and also to kind of work in a very data-driven policy way as well. So I am and working with Indigenous knowledge and working in a community grassroots up way. I am championing and cheering all of those things. My first question, I as a moderator, I think it would be a little bit remiss for me to say that we all kind of want to work, many of us do want to work like that, but the white elephant in the room is that the funding structure and the practice structure for doing nature-based stuff and community-based work is often very short-term, project-paced, kind of taking off a small piece of the problem, but wanting to see the broader impacts from, whereas water is so prismatic and kind of holistic in the way that you have to work. What are you finding as some solutions forward to kind of getting different project models and funding models to do different kinds of work? Anyone can answer that one.
That's a tough question, Sam. So in terms of innovative funding models, I think that we're all looking at ways to find partners that are able to support innovative, adaptive pilot project implementation and build on the success of those projects. I hope, Mary, Mayela, that resonates with some of the work that you shared out as well. But funding is certainly a challenge. The question of sustainable financing often comes up when we ask our members what their priority topics are, and it is not an easy question to answer. But I do think with particularly some of the funding that's becoming available through the green climate funding at the international level, there are opportunities to think more holistically about how we reduce risk to disasters while also investing in more resilient natural systems. So I don't have a clear answer, but I do think that innovative approaches to finding new financing mechanisms for pilot projects are a leading practice that I've observed, and something that we can then build off of as those projects are successful. I hope that starts the conversation at least.
Yeah, I have, as a practitioner, noticed that too, that there's more funding for these kind of pilot things to do innovatively and creatively. And I only hope that we can keep sharing and growing the space for that, away from the pilots to do innovative stuff to kind of more broader change.
Maybe I can add on to some of the work that we do. So one of the innovative funding mechanisms we've been really working with is the Atoll Water Security Partnership with New Zealand, which has really scaled up the effort we do around strengthening water security in our atoll water countries and Lime raised islands. So with the Atoll Water Partnership, we work with 8 countries to really strengthen their capacity around access to clean water and sanitation. And that came about from the Samoa pathway, where there was an endorsement for partnerships. And because of that endorsement, it led to the establishment of the Atoll Water Partnership between SPC, New Zealand, and those Pacific Island countries. So I would like to acknowledge New Zealand for that support, which has really ensured that we support those member countries with the critical water infrastructure that they need. And also picking up on Erin's point about access to climate financing, I think that's an area that even the Pacific Water and Wastewater Association ministerial meeting that was held in 2022 and 2023, the water ministers really call for increase of access to climate financing because of the impacts of climate change issues on water security. And I think you saw from my presentation that we really need to strengthen engagement in water security as a determinant of resilience. And one example I can give is Vanuatu worked in partnership with the Pacific community to access GCF funding for a sanitation water project in Vanuatu. And, you know, like for us to access those funds, it's a very, I would say, difficult process because of the criteria involved, but we managed to do that. And we also have a climate change program within SPC, and we have a loss and damage advisor. So he's working with us to look at case studies where we can gather evidence-based research on loss and damages from climate change, which we can then use to access finance from loss and damage fund. I think my understanding is that during the COP that was held last year, there was, I think, allocation for loss and damage funds. So we are trying to gather the evidence from the water space so that we can put some funding proposals to access those type of funds. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'll go to the next question. This is from Catherine Ibata Arens. Bonsoir from Paris. Thank you to Mary, Mayela and Erin for your talks and to Samantha for putting this webinar together. I'm Catherine Ibata Arens, endowed professor in environmental diplomacy, DePaul University. I'm researching the intersections of healthy environments and human health. My questions are, what, if anything, have such countries as France and Japan done to contribute to the water health or resilience efforts in the region? For example, through humanitarian aid and or public-private partnerships to improve sanitation and potability of water. What should they do in the future, especially France, which still claims certain Pacific islands as French territories?
Okay, so maybe I can go first. It's like we work with different development partners, and like there are different arrangements. So some work directly with bilateral agreements with the countries, and we have also programs where it's funded by different donors. So in terms of France, so the Pacific community, which is owned by members of the Pacific, which is France is also a member, and they support water security for the territories. So they work closely with the Pacific Community Office in New Caledonia. So in terms of water security work we do as SPC for the territories, it's managed by our Numia office who work directly with France to support the territories. Yeah. And yeah, I think with other countries, they work directly with bilateral agreements.
Great. If no one else has one to add to that, I will, I'm not sure who this one was for, but I'll open it up to broader for people to answer. Have you been connecting your work to the school system through curriculum, like a farm to school program? That's a good one.
Well, I can share a little bit. We have our WASH programs has a very big area of water in schools, which is, it talks about different things from, wash your hands to menstrual hygiene management to inclusiveness. And we also have programs that work with safe water storage and safe water treatment. So there's resources and there's work that we do with schools, from young people to older kids. CRY doesn't do it in specific because it's more in a community base, and it talks about like the different, from church to government, families, land, property of land, which is, in some contexts, it's a really complicated topic. So yeah, in a crisis-based, no, but in an institution, in an NGO way, we do. We work on children, and we do share those resources, and we do training of trainers for the teachers so that we can continue that work. I hope that answers the question.
If I can just add on. So with the Pacific community, we are also discussing with our partners the feasibility of developing some professional training in water security. So it's in our discussions at the moment.
And if I could add as well, we are working to develop targeted curriculum that would be appropriate for entry-level professionals, but also with our partners, there is a large focus on youth engagement. So for example, in Hawaii, they have a Sustainable Development Goal Youth Council that focuses a bit more on policy and communications, but certainly provides general awareness to the issues and helps young people champion for their priorities in the legislative space. Also in Guam, we see the Conservation Corps, which is part of their Green Growth Initiative, which aims to help implement some of their projects watershed restoration-wise. They have a really exciting project where they go out and teach school children how to create sort of slingstone clay balls that are full of seeds and help reforest some of the denuded landscapes with that approach, which I think is great hands-on learning. Also in the CNMI, there are efforts, and this is actually a goal in their Comprehensive Sustainable Development Plan, efforts to support youth engagement K through 12 in understanding climate change impacts and watershed management planning at appropriate levels in the curriculum. And so that's being incorporated into the school system. And as those outcomes are available and shareable, I hope to be able to also share them through the network. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's talking to what we're doing now, but we're also doing to secure the future. This next question is a good one too. I think it kind of goes to what Mary was talking about at the top about the rhyme of the ancient mariner, water everywhere and nothing to drink. It's saying, have you tried seawater desalination to increase the water resource? Do you guys want to talk about opportunities, but also challenges with desal in the Pacific States?
Yes, so with the work we do, yeah, definitely we also do desalination plants, but there's a lot of concerns and challenges with desalination plants because of capacity and logistical issues and availability of spare parts in the countries, because a lot of our countries are remote, very far, of course, from economic centers, and so when a desal plant goes bad, then it takes ages for spare part to come. So we try to focus on more on rainwater harvesting and tapping into the groundwater fresh lands, and desalination plants would mostly be when there's a disaster and we need to quickly get water. But there was an example from one of our countries where there was no water, and then when the desalination plants arrived, and then the rain came. So yeah, so it's also about balancing all those efforts and what's feasible and what needs to be really prioritized according to the context we have in the Pacific. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. This one is from Elena Malm. This is a local Hawaii question, so maybe this one goes to Erin. Any progress on the wastewater treatment spills that seem to happen frequently in Kailua, Kanaoe ocean ecosystems?
I would be happy to look into that question and circle back. So maybe if Elena wants to put in an email so I could follow up on that. I do not have direct firsthand knowledge of the current state of those initiatives, but be happy to get some more information there.
Yeah, maybe share that with me too. I'm interested to know in that as well. Alexandra Solka asks, I'm wondering if the format you presented on the green water storm collectors is actually efficient. As with these storms and floodings, lots of material potential metallic samples or polluted microorganisms can be mixed within these collectors. And therefore my question would be, which kind of isolation systems are developed there?
Also a great question and a bit technical. And so basically what the Follow the Drop app is trying to do is to identify appropriate interventions based on the site. And so I don't have specific examples of what isolation systems might be proposed on specific sites, but I do know that they are being very sensitive to the groundwater recharge areas. And so if there are concerns about contaminants, ensuring that the soil is going to be providing sufficient filtration or supplementing that if necessary, I believe is part of that discussion and the report that is produced based on the specific site conditions. But again, happy to follow up if you'd like to drop your email in the chat to get you a bit more information there as well. Thank you.
Okay, great. This one is also a good one. This one is from John Climo, who I know works for MFAT in New Zealand. He says, great presentations, thanks team. One theme I see coming through strongly is a linkage between ecosystem health and water security. What can be done better to encourage cross-sector collaboration in this space? How can we improve mainstreaming or a more holistic approach for future activities? Example, those supported by donor countries and multilateral funds. I think that was also related to the question that I asked, but it's good to see a funder here, somebody who represents a funder here talking about that as well. Thanks, John.
Maybe I'll have a go with the work that we do. So the work that we do, which is funded, of course, via MFAT, is to really look at how we can strengthen multi-sectoral engagement across all sectors, partners, so both vertical, horizontal partnerships. And we are hoping that through this water security engagement strategy, everybody can see where they can align and look at the different parts. So it's not really a rigid strategy, but it's a flexible strategy. For example, where the agriculture sector can see they can align to that, the tourism sector can see where they fit in. So it's that type of engagement strategy that allows different sectors to really look at how they can work together. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I know in the my research is around watersheds as well. And when you're talking about watershed, it's just, it's so many different ministries. In the Solomons, it's Ministry of Health and Ministry of Lands and Ministry of Forestry and Ministry of the Environment. All of these different people who all have pieces in this pie. So it can be very, very difficult to actually get that collaboration and between communities too in the watershed. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that one before we go to the next one?
I just wanted to comment on the importance of that cross-sectoral collaboration. It's absolutely critical. And I think that historically, there has been a lot of siloing in the built infrastructure realm that has perhaps disconnected it from the holistic management of watersheds that in the water space is so critical. And so creating those connections between the environmental managers, the utilities, the community at large to inform what their priorities are is becoming a leading practice that we're seeing implemented throughout the Pacific. And so I think that also a challenge here in connecting to funding and donors is to show the efficacy. And it's often quite hard to measure the benefits, the impacts of these connections, of these conversations, but they are so critical in ensuring that projects are implemented in a way that meets the community's needs and can be sustained. Thank you.
It's a really, really good point. Thanks. The next question is from Nancy Convard. Would any of the speakers speak to making the connections of water security to public health and any need to do this to raise its profile with policymakers and financing sources? Well, obvious to most, I hope it would be interesting to have the data to support increase support to the issue from another perspective. Good point. Yeah, WASH is often pushed into the health ministries and the health sector when it's really a broader issue.
Okay, maybe I can try my best. So, yeah, in terms of public health, with the work that we do, we are elevating water security, not just as a health issue, but as a climate resilience issue as well. So really elevating water security to even leaders' agenda so in the Pacific, like we would now have the Pacific Islands Forum leaders, Forum Officials Committee, and different ministerials. So we as the Pacific community are elevating water security at those levels. And last week we also engaged with public health division. So in SPC, we have a public health division which supports our countries to really support the health sector. So in last week in Nandi, there was a climate change health meeting looking at how climate change impacts on the health sector. And so we did a presentation on water security and the health impacts. And in September, there will be a meeting of all public health divisions from the countries, and we've been invited to also present in that meeting. So yeah, so with the work we do, we really try to engage with different sectors, and we are also engaging with our agriculture sector to look around what water for food security, and also tourism. It's still an area we are interested to tap into as well. Yeah. But can I just add that we need everybody on board, and we need all our voices on board, because it's what the security actually, it's not visible. We did a scoping study, and we found the visibility of what the security is very low in regional frameworks. And I think when we do project proposals, the baseline is always to look at regional frameworks, national policy frameworks, and see if what the security is a priority and align those with whatever criteria that is out there. So I think at whatever level you are, please, I encourage you, be a voice for water security, because we need to be united in our efforts. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Mary. Sometimes I think that it's a strength that water is across so many sectors and it's so prismatic and it's so many different things, but then it can also be a little bit of a weakness as everybody carves up a little slice of the problem, and we all need to be on board working together on it. Great. Anybody else have a point on the health question before we move to the next one? Okay, so this one is from the Philippines. Wilfred Alvarez, good morning from the Philippines. I am Wilfred Alvarez, a National Fellow with the Center for Neighbour Studies. I would like to learn and collaborate with you regarding the current activities by the island countries. In the Philippines, we have islands that are being eaten up by the seas, and this is helpful for us, hoping to learn more. So maybe this is a chance for each of the speakers to say how people can connect and learn more from your different organizations. What's the next step in terms of resources and learning for people?
Okay, we have the Pacific Resilience Meeting, which is one of the mechanisms that is under the Pacific Resilience Partnership, and it is held every 2 years. And that's where it provides a sectoral learning platform for everyone, and please do join that. I think the next one will be next year, because the last one was held last year. And I think in October there will be the Asia Pacific Disaster Managers and Ministerial meeting in Manila, and our team will be there. So happy to connect when we'll be there in October, I think from the 12th to 19th.
Great. This is another question. Oh, sorry. No, you want to go? Erin, you go. You've got the community practice, so you go.
I did want to just offer that we do have an open forum. So if you'd like to sign up and learn more, you can go to islands2030.org. You can also email me directly at erin@islands2030.org, and I'd be happy to show you the resources we have available, talk about some of your data needs and interests, and connect you to some resources in that regard as well. So thank you for the question and the opportunity to share.
Mayela, do you want to go too?
Yeah, just because I just share it in the I asked if they can share in the group. But yeah, we do have Live and Learn does have several educational resources, but it's more a self-learn kind of thing, guides, templates, facilitation work for people to work with their own community at their own context. So it's accessible to in our website, and you don't even have to subscribe to our newsletter or anything. You just go download it and ready to go.
Wonderful. This question is related. Will we be providing speaker contacts? HDOH will be having a climate and health conference and would be good to contact. So if people are comfortable, we'll send all the contacts out when we send up the follow-up email so people can connect. Okay. This is the next question. Does Erin have an example of what good might look like? Her comment made on evaluation and impact. Yeah, this is, as a practitioner, I know that this is a challenge as well, showing impact, particularly when I think Mary was talking about the software, right? The people stuff. It's the hardest thing to do. It takes the most resources, and showing impact can often be the hardest. How do you go about showing impact in the different spaces in which you work?
I mean, I think this is a challenge that we're all struggling to overcome. I think that showing, a number of people that attended meetings does not necessarily produce a compelling metric for action. And so one of the things we're hoping to track in terms of engagements through the virtual island platform is the relationships that result in concrete actions. But as we know, those take time, they take financing, they take champions to further those initiatives. And so happy to hear the other panelists' reflections on this as well. If you have an example of a good metric that measures those sort of soft outcomes, but I think we all recognize how important they are. And so often I've found in past projects that they are often combined with some of the more sort of hardware focused outcomes. So it could be a little bit of both. I know with some of the NIPWIP projects I worked on in the past, we looked at acres restored plus number of people coming to meetings or engaged in coral restoration or watershed restoration trainings, etc. So just not to say that that is a great example, but that has been a workable example in my past experience. Thank you for the question.
Great. I think it's been a really great conversation, and I'm really excited by everybody's work that's presented today, and excited to continue the conversation and working together to get everybody on board. So I will thank everybody for coming and give it to Sandeep to wrap up on behalf of the East West Centre. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming.
Thank you, Sam. And thanks to all the panelists for a really interesting and stimulating discussion. I don't think an hour and a half was sufficient to cover all the points that many of you had raised. I just wish that we could have had about 3 hours to go on with this panel. But nonetheless, thank you very much. Thanks, Sam, for being a wonderful moderator. I also want to take the opportunity to thank Catherine, Leah, and the members of the program staff at the East West Centre for providing all the handholding and patiently making sure that behind the scenes, the event goes off smoothly. And I also want to thank members of the audience for attending in good numbers and vigorously participating in the discussion with your questions. And before we wrap up, I just wanted to share that next week we are going to have the next talk is on the 21st. It's on August 21st. And it will be featuring Dr. Todd A. Henry, who will be talking about the AIDS, panic, and disease boundaries in late authoritarian South Korea. Once again, the talk is virtual and it's from 2 to 3 p.m. Hawaii Standard Time. Hope all of you will join. Thank you very much once and all. Bye-bye.